Welcome to Shopper Matters, a podcast brought to you by the Independent Grocers Alliance. And now your host, Michael La Kier.
Welcome back to Shopper Matters, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of retail through the lens of today's most influential shoppers, retailers, and vendors. I'm your host, Michael La Kier, the Vice President of Brand Development for the Independent Grocers Alliance. IGA is the world's largest grocery network with well over 7,500 retail stores across more than 30 countries, commonwealths, and territories. I can't thank you enough for tuning into today's episode. A quick request as we get started. Please consider following us on your preferred podcast listening app if you don't already do so. Subscribing, whether it's Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or other platforms, will ensure you automatically receive new episodes as they're released. Shopper Matters is designed to bring you insights from industry leaders, actionable advice, and the latest thinking on what drives today's shoppers. We highlight the challenges brands face and the opportunities that come from truly understanding how people live, shop, and make decisions. Today, we're zooming in on one of the most essential but often overlooked parts of the retail landscape, independent grocery shoppers. In a world of big box retailers, national chains, and delivery at your doorstep, the local grocer still matters, and not just sentimentally. These retailers are often the heartbeat of their local communities, but they're also facing pressure to evolve digitally, operationally, and financially faster than ever before. So, to explore what that evolution looks like and how independents can not only survive but thrive, we're joined by Rob Belcore, co-founder and chief commercial officer of RSA America, a company working to equip independent grocers with the tools, insights, and strategic guidance they need to compete on a national level. Rob has been in the trenches of independent retail, digital transformation, and shopper marketing for years. And today on Shopper Matters, we're going to tap into that experience. So Rob, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Sure. So let's rewind a bit. You helped co-found RSA America with a mission to empower independent grocers through technology and smarter marketing. So what was the spark for that? What did you see in the market that made you go all in on serving this segment?
So before founding the company, I worked for a great global management consulting firm. We were considered a small big firm or a big small firm. And I was able to work on a couple very interesting projects, all in the omni-channel world. But specifically what drove my attention was I was in the team that worked in the business process optimization side of Target deploying their Cartwheel application back in 2013. This was the first truly integrated digital mobile couponing application where people would just sign up, no physical cards required to link. And what really drove me to the power of that was with a long background in digital marketing. For years, it was, well, this is the open rates we got. This was the clicks we got. This is the impressions we got. This was the views we got, all this rich digital marketing data. But tying it back to transaction was virtually impossible. And again, when we go back to 2011, 2012, this is before the e-commerce movements that existed, right? So, seeing what was implemented at Target and being able to take all that rich data and actually tie it back to transaction and say, hey, this person who saw, who clicked, who we delivered this message to, they did in fact transact, and to get into that power of conversion, that really was the big light bulb for me, the aha moment of like, this is what every retailer is going to need. Now, ultimately, my in-laws do own some grocery stores. So when I looked at the utilization of this type of technology, it was going to be an obvious buy before build for the independent grocery store segment. These type of technologies and systems wouldn't be able to be built by even your large scale independent retailers. So the nature of creating the technology and delivering it to the retailers became a very, very, very quick, like, hey, this is what we need to do. Now, I'd still say that we were probably a little bit early into the market for the first couple of years. I remember driving around Chicago with local independent retailers, and there was just confusion of what someone can do this with their phone, and it reduces my point of sale system. So as the technology has become much more, I would say, widespread, we're not just talking about grocery. When we look at, mobile technology as a whole, Look at the amount of orders that Chipotle does on their mobile application. Look at how much DoorDash is utilized. Really the mobile consumer has grown so much in the last 10 years. And having, the independent retailers positioned to engage with customers in the mobile space, it's very fulfilling for us as we go through retailers. Sometimes it's frustrating, but also fulfilling when we hear a lot of employees and personnel at the store say, oh, our application is going to be just like Dollar General's. Our application is going to be just like Kroger's. Our technology is going to be just like Target's. We're like, yes, it is. That's what, again, we talk about communicating with customers, leveling that playing field on the channels is just very important.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, hopefully the answer is if it's just like those, it's actually going to be better, but we'll come back to that later on.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the shopper behavior, and Shopper Matters. We're here to talk about what's happening with shoppers.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, from day one to today, what makes the independent grocery shopper different? Are their needs or expectations evolving in unique ways compared to the national chains?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we see about the independent grocery store shopper, and we track about 6 million unique customers on a monthly basis, so it's a pretty good penetration, is really their expectation of product evolution as it pertains to what's inside the grocery store. So, when you take any startup CPG company, mid-size, mid-scale company, while I'm sure every CPG would say their goal is to get national distribution at Walmart, national distribution at Costco, national distribution at Kroger, well, it's certainly the goal. Their starting point is always in independent grocers. So what we see is that, in terms of people who are hunting for the new product, whether it's a healthy product, whether it's a new flavor and things like that, we see independent grocery shoppers spend a lot of time looking at product assortment and product mix to say, hey, what is out there that's unique for me? And they really believe and task their independent owner and operator, who many times they know on a first name basis. And I'm always amazed of with my father-in-law when I go to the grocery store, I see how many customers know him by his name, right? And he fields still, over 35 years in the business, he fields product requests. Hey, if you want a product, tell me about it. If I don't have it, we'll go find it. So we see this great feedback of consumers of, hey, I'm looking for this or something like this. And their desire to have new products in the store is really something I think separates them, because when you're walking into a Walmart, you're walking into a Kroger, grocers don't feel like shoppers don't feel like they have that personal touch with a Walmart to be able to come in and say, hey, can you find this product for me? Can you go get it? Now, ultimately, we know that behind the scenes is that vendor an approved vendor? Have they gone through the vetting process? Have they done this? Have they gone through all these hoops and hurdles? So that's where, again, I think the customers, while they might not understand the underlying component of why new products show up on the shelves faster at independent grocers than they do at Kroger, at Walmart, they don't understand the logistics of it, but they certainly understand the nimbleness of the independent grocer and the willingness to bring new product in per their request.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you mentioned a couple words there in terms of the connection, which has always existed between the local store and the shopper. But the other piece that I think was a little bit of an insight in terms of the curiosity of independent shoppers and what they're seeking for in products. And they're not afraid to ask questions because of that connection. So I think it's an interesting point. One of the things RSA talks about is shedding light on new shopper behavior, both inside and outside the store. We just talked a little bit about this curiosity seeking, but can you give us a sense of the kind of insights you're seeing from that data, maybe one or two that stands out the most at this point?
So when we are tracking, so even with CPGs who are bringing new product to market, when we're tracking turns and engagement in turns, in terms of, hey, here's a new product that was launched, here's the new product marketing campaign that was behind it, from the CPGs that are launching new products in independents. Now, I can only assume that the data that they're saying in these campaigns they're running in other larger retailers we don't work with is accurate. But we see a higher turn percentage in terms of, hey, based on the user base that we deployed this new product to and this new campaign to, we're converting higher percentages of customers to a brand new product than we are at national chains. And that's really when I get that feedback from some CPG companies that we work with. I think that data really supports that. Yeah, these customers at the independent grocers, if you're a brand looking to bring product to market, there's logistical challenges anywhere, but you probably
Sure.
have the best customer base at the independent grocers to accomplish that goal, because the willingness to try a new product just seems to be higher, from the data that we see and that our CPG partners share with us.
Yeah, that supports some of the things that we talk about at IGA in terms of, we can find stores to test. We can find stores that are willing to engage differently, perhaps than the larger chains. And your data in terms of shoppers supporting that helps tell that story. So that's great. So, what kinds of triggers or events that could be in store or through apps have you found that drive the strongest shift in shopper behavior? So that could be personalized offers, real-time coupons, location-based prompts. What are you seeing, I guess, that moves the needle the most?
So the execution of automation behind personalization is just having tremendous results. There's plenty of publicly available data on what personalization does for customers, how it increases their frequency, their basket. And we as a company always sometimes wonder about, hey, how widely published are these case studies and how accurate are they, and things of that nature. But when grocers are executing targeted personalized offers to the appropriate segments, the results are astounding. And obviously the inherent underlying data that we have is loyalty data, right? And a lot of people, when they talk of loyalty, what we see in the market, it goes from here's my top customers and here's my lost customers. And what's my lost customer campaign versus the top customer campaign? But getting into those middle ground segments of here's my opportunity customers, they are engaged in my loyalty program. They're not one of my top customers, but they are seeing, my marketing, my promotions and things of that nature. The ability to drive 30-40% increase in transactions and sales from these opportunity customers is very real with personalization. Because we go through some simple logic of, if this person buys bananas and they only shop in our store once a month, obviously we're leveraging the recency, frequency, monetary triggers to see what people are doing. They struggle with frequency. But when that person who shops infrequently does buy a perishable item, again, if it's bananas, if it's milk, if it's bread, if it's beef, these are things people have to buy weekly. Getting that repeat visit for a customer who shops once a month and has bananas in their basket every time, getting them to come back into the store just because we're discounting bananas for them, is very achievable. And the ROI behind these is incredible.
Yeah. So how do you see the role of personalization evolving in brand to shopper communications in the grocery space without crossing that line into creepy? I mean, there's a difference between, hey, there's a discount on bananas, and hey, Rob, we've seen that you've been to the store 10 times and are doing this and so on and so forth. And therefore, here's bananas. So how do you avoid that line of compelling versus creepy?
So a lot of what we would suggest in that space is your macro has to feed your micro. So one of the most important components is we have to create good global engagement that gets people looking at what you're doing, as opposed to relying on personalization for driving engagement. If you're able to drive great macro engagement with global promotion, global promotional, global marketing strategy, the ability to then place personalized offers becomes something you can passively do. So we're not reliant on sending out all these individual emails to where, oh, well, this person gets bananas and strawberries and beef and bread. And you go online, now all of a sudden they're getting 5 levels of communication. I think that increased level of communication is what adds to the creepiness component of it. If we can create an ecosystem where people are engaging with us on a weekly basis, and as they're looking at what we're doing at the macro level to say, hey, what's in the ad this week? What are the great digital offers this week? Then the customer finds personalized offers. So while they may be looking to see, hey, what's this week's free item, which is a global thing that goes out to so many customers across our retail network, they're looking to see what the free item is, but while they're actually engaged in looking at that global promotion, there's great placement of, oh, I found something that's very relevant to me. So that's really what we look at is, if you want to be driving personalization and driving the benefits of personalization, the foundation of that is generating at a macro level very good digital consumer engagement.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had some conversations recently with a number of CPG brands that talk about the value of displays, which is really significant. However, if you don't get somebody into the store, like, you're macro to micro, right? If you're not driving traffic, then it doesn't matter how many displays you have or what's on display, you're not going to get somebody in store. So
Correct.
I love the analogy of, hey, if we're not doing the right things to get them engaged overall, doesn't matter if you're giving away free bananas 24/7, they're not engaged, they're not going to see the message.
Correct.
I'm not sure why we're talking about bananas, but it's one of my favorite fruits. But I think it's a great point in terms of, how do you take that insight and how do you do more with it? So let's talk for a second about that insight plus other insights. How can retailers turn those insights into better, more personalized shopping experiences, especially for the independents, without the perhaps big budgets or big staff of some of the other big guys?
So the first thing that we tell any retailer is you have to commit to some budget. So again, back to that, loyal customer and lost customer metric, it's, technology, and I bought the technology. Now it's supposed to do what it's supposed to do, right? Ultimately,
Right.
there has to be some commitment of budget. Now, from that standpoint, if you are committing a budget and you are committing an expenditure, how does the retailer go about analyzing it? A lot of that comes down to the responsibility, in our opinion, of if it's your partner solution provider, if it's your wholesaler who brought you the solution, you should be expecting some external support in these solutions that you have. Because that's one of the things we've seen for years working with over 200 equity groups. When it comes down to analyzing shopper data, it's a struggle for the retailers. It's a struggle. So I think part of it is just level setting the expectations of, we can read and hear about personalization, AI, automation, but if there's not a time commitment from the retailer and it's not a big requirement, we may be talking about an hour a month just to look at what has been going on, what's been doing. And again, there has to be some budget at least allocated to it. There just has to be the commitment of this is important to my business. I was looking at a Progressive Grocer article. It was a great article about, I believe it was Giant Eagle, enhanced their loyalty program and sent out 25 million personalized offers, right? So when you start to look at, 25 million personalized offers that are going out, again, in the world of digital, a lot of independent grocers are expecting, I'm buying a digital solution, all of it's funded by the vendor community, and that's what I need to have in my store. When you look at 25 million personalized offers that are set out, those are all funded by the retailer, and those are driving the engagement. So I think retailers really need to take the ownership of, if I have these tools, I can get great participation from CPGs. But again, that responsibility of the macro engagement, that's on us to fund.
And I think it's, I think you said it earlier, but just to clarify, personally, it's a two-way street, right? If all you're buying, the term software as service, right? If all you're buying is the software and not some level of reporting and assistance and stuff like that, it's not going to go well. And if all you're expecting the vendor to do everything for you, it also won't go well, or you're going to end up paying more for that service versus what you're doing. And I think the retailer knows their business the best in terms
Without
of
a doubt.
how it's worked, how it's moved, but they need assistance and support of, hey, here's things perhaps that you're not seeing that other retailers have done to be successful, and here's how to do it, and here's how to set things up, here's how to think about it.
Yep.
But I think you're right. If it's not, it's like the old days of CRM, right? We got to be an email, and you buy CRM systems, and then you're like, it's not working. You're like, why is it not working? It's because you don't have a strategy, you don't have marketing behind it, you don't have the creative behind it that's needed to engage people. You can't just buy any type of system, loyalty, personalization, AI, and just expect it to go on autopilot. And I guess since I mentioned AI, like maybe the caveat there is yet, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in
Well,
some way at some point that will happen.
possibly, but ultimately, a lot of the word nomenclature, the buzzword for years has been omni-channel, right? Omni-channel digital,
Mm-hmm.
omni-channel this, and what we see with the retail community is the physical store is a massive component of omni-channel,
Oh
and
yeah,
there's nothing AI can do today, unless there's AI based robots working inside the grocery stores, which, to be clear, if you drive through a McDonald's, if you drive through a Dunkin' Donuts, you hear somebody with a recorded message asking if you're using the McDonald's app, asking if you're using the Dunkin' Donuts app. It's not the person that you pull up to at the window who asked you that. So, again, when we talk about the omni channel, the store is always going to be the beginning and end of if we're executing with these things, are we executing at store level? And
yeah.
that's
I
where we
think that makes
see
sense.
again, all this digital, all these things that retailers need to invest in, it has to come back into the store level execution.
Yeah. So when looking at the retailers from an execution standpoint, as we just talked about, when you look at those retailers who are adapting well, what are they doing differently with their promotions, merchandising, and digital and mobile strategy?
So the ones that are adapting really well are integrating what they're doing in the loyalty and personalized or extra promotion space. They're integrating it into their macro promotional strategy. A lot of what we see is this is my ad markdown, this is my 3-day sale markdown, this is my loyalty markdown, and they're all set up in separate buckets. And a lot of times we see the loyalty promotions and things of that nature fall into the marketing world. And then the marketing world gets no support from the category management world, right? And this is where then the loyalty program is undervalued by the customer. So the stores that we see are having the greatest sales lift, profit lift, things of that nature. They're really breaking down these walls inside their organization and say, hey, if we want an omni-channel shopping experience, we need omni-channel budgeting from that standpoint. So,
Yep.
the category managers in the meat department, the produce department, they have to be funding offers out of margin for the loyalty program to be relevant. Because if we're not focusing on fresh, if we're not promoting these things where we have better access to higher quality product, where we differentiate ourselves from our big competitors, if investments aren't made in that sector, then these loyalty programs all become pretty irrelevant to the customers. It's just another thing that's there and then it's underutilized. So that's what we see is the grocers that are truly integrating loyalty into their macro pricing and promotional strategy. They're the ones who consistently have better gross margin improvement, have better sales improvement, but ultimately that number, we talk about the budgeting of targeted and AI, that's the groundwork that enables them to come up with a budget and say, okay, I'm able to see this is the incremental profit that I have. This is the incremental sales I have. And this is how much of that incrementality I'm going to reinvest back into the business. Because that's where we see a lot of grocers. We can say budget, 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 and its investment has to have ROI. But the roadmap of all of this technology, if you're in loyalty, you should be using loyalty to increase your profitability. You should understand what that increase in profitability is, and then be making decisions that only the retailer can make about how much of that profitability increase is going to go back to the consumers.
I think as you're going through it, the role of omni-channel shopper, if you buy into that concept, which I don't realize, or I don't think anyone's not buying into that concept at this point, but if you buy into that concept, you've got to plan on an omni-channel basis. To your point, because otherwise, your silos are not going to match up to how the shopper's shopping. And so I love that analogy of omni-channel shopper, omni-channel planning or budgeting or investing, whatever you want to call it, so that you can understand, here's how I engage with different shoppers instead of doing it again in silos. So let's perhaps get siloed a little bit. Let's talk about grocery apps. Can you speak a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of usage and where shoppers are spending most of their time within apps?
So the main driver of grocery applications is always and probably always will be in digital promotion. because that's what's driving immediate monetary value to the customer. However, where we've seen tremendous increases in the online shopping space is not the conventional shop the whole store. So when we look at online shopping, we really want to have the retailers take a hard look at their organization and say, what are you selling? Because yes, everyone is selling Cheerios. We understand that. But if you have a made to order sandwich, or if you're doing a fried chicken program or a pizza program, or you have catering, when we look at the mobile engagement and the statistics of where mobile ordering comes from, again, look at the comparison of Chipotle. Chipotle is a QSR restaurant. There's thousands of grocers that operate in their community as a QSR restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
But we exclusively go to market as a grocery store that happens to offer QSR food service. So that's a huge differentiation of we've seen tremendous increase in deli and prepared food sales of customers who can just open up an application, click 3 times and buy something. Now, that may not be the $75 average basket that everybody wants to chase after in the online shopping experience. But if we're talking about being able to increase your fried chicken sales 20% by the expansion of mobile ordering capabilities, that's huge. So we ask our retailers a lot to, again, if you have fried chicken, if you have pizza, if you have sandwiches, show me one competitor in the lunch space. Again, if it's KFC, if it's Jimmy John's, again, if it's Domino's Pizza, show me one of your competitors in that silo who isn't engaging in mobile ordering.
Yep.
And they all are. So that's we talk about what are the feature functions that's needed to have a QSR environment inside your store and not to extend mobile ordering. You're talking about these QSR restaurants are doing over 30% of their total sales through mobile ordering.
And, how many times have you in the past gone shopping and go, well, I want to pick up something for lunch or something for dinner. Mm-hmm. And you go elsewhere because you haven't been given as much of an option to do that. And so, Hey, I'm going to do one-stop shopping. I know I trust my grocer for all the other stuff. Why wouldn't I trust them for my meal as well? Saves time. It's efficient. And, chances are it's going to be much cheaper than going to any of those food service.
And it's not just cheaper; it's a quality component, right? I've told my father-in-law for years, lunch at grocery stores is the best kept secret in the industry. But I understand why more customers don't engage with it, because the perception is if I'm coming in and trying to grab something fast at noon on a Tuesday, you've probably got the elder shoppers and they're at noon and they're slow in the aisle and then I'm behind them in the check stand. And it's just not very convenient versus I can run in and out of Subway in 5 minutes. So I think that expansion of the quality that independent grocers are known for, right? And their ability to build good touch points with their customers. These are all massive advantages that the independent grocers have. There's a better trust factor. There's more clarity and quality. To expand that trust and quality and add the convenience, we've seen retailers really be able to drive tremendous sales in their deli departments or their hot foods departments.
Yeah, and conversely, I would imagine if it's set up right and you've established that trust, that there's the converse. Hey, I want to go grab this from the grocery store. And oh, by the way, I'll add eggs, I'll add bananas, I'll add protein so that I can have something ready to go for dinner instead of the classic, it's 5 p.m. What am I going to have for dinner? Do I go out? Do I go to the grocery store, et cetera? That convenience factor, as you mentioned, is critically important. Mm-hmm. So let's look ahead to the future. RSA America touches on many things, and our conversation has touched on many things like AI, automation, advanced analytics. How should independents, or frankly, grocers in general, think about using these tools realistically in the next year or two?
So I would encourage independent retailers to really do their own system reviews today, because all of these things are extensions, right? So RSA America is a base loyalty program. Then we have an AI-driven automation, add-on to our loyalty system. So realistically, if you're not generating good return, good engagement on your base program, The notion that we can layer more on top of that and it's going to make it better, that's a very false notion. So you have to be executing on what you have first, which enables you to get into that greater level and greater depth. Um, so again, that's not what should they do in the next couple of years. I think that's the internal review that retailers should be doing now. But then in the next couple of years, there's a big component on trust that retailers have to get to. So when we founded the company, we actually had automation tools back in 2014 that absolutely no retailer said, "Oh, I'm going to trust some system to discount my strawberries for me," right? So we took it out for years. Now we're adding tools back in. So there has to be some level of trust of the technology and ultimately doing things in micro doses, but truly taking baby steps in this technology of what do you need to have proven and give the technology the opportunity to prove it. And then there's a very big catch and release where you have to trust and believe that the models are working and you can't be inhibiting the models. So we've seen a lot of people in the market when they go into targeted offers, they're looking at, oh, okay, I want to set a $5,000 budget. And when you spend $5,000, it's done. Well, if that $5,000 generated $50,000 of incremental sales and you were happy with that ROI, wouldn't you have been just as happy with $15,000 spent driving $150,000 of ROI? So we see a lot of retailers are actually curbing their own growth in these tools because they're concerned about the cost. And when they say the cost, we're talking about the promotional expenditure. So I think that's what retailers have to open themselves up to is really start to understand the ROI points on an individual offer level and say, hey, if I'm happy with one of these, would I be happy with 100 of these? And then understand, yes, if you're looking at your end-of-day reports in your point of sale system, your total digital coupon utilization is going to go up and up and up. But what will be coming with that will be sales as well. So I think that's the thing that retailers need to open themselves up to more than anything is that when we talk about AI and personalized offers, it's the collection of 1,000 things that drives a result. There's no one magic targeted offer. It's like, oh, if I just do this, I'm going to drive sales. Because when you start to look at this, again, I'll use the Giant Eagle, 25 million personalized offers. That's a lot of activity to try and drive sales up a little bit. But when we're hitting a subset of customers with a targeted offer that's going to have, maybe a 10% engagement rate, a 5% redemption rate, and you start adding all of this up, you have to be doing 100 things at once. And that's not something any human can actually do, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the grocer, again, needs to understand the ROI and understand that their investments, if they have a positive ROI, you have to take the shackles off of the tools and let the tools do what they're designed to do.
I think that's a super interesting point because that's counter to how CPG and retail have budgeted for the past 100 plus years, right? It's here's my coupon budget, here's my promotional budget. And I use the analogy, having worked at CPG, here's how budgets work. When you have a good year and your budget's $500,000, no matter how good you're doing, your budget's $500,000. Mm-hmm. In a bad year, your budget was $500,000 and then gets stripped down to $400,000 and maybe $300,000, mm-hmm. right? So that shift, we talk about omni-channel and e-com. If you think about how most DTC brands were created and how they budget, it is based on ROI, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll spend $5,000 all day long to get $50,000. And until that incrementality stops, I'm going after it. Mm-hmm. CPG and retailer are a different animal. So I think that's going to take some change management in terms of showing, as you said, I think, I don't remember the analogy, but you talked about, you get the proofs in the pudding. And so showing that and making sure people understand that, especially as you're then talking about potentially merchant funded offers and budgets you get from them, it's just going to require a huge amount of change management.
The change management procedures are real. And, Michael, as you talk about budgeting, you're spot on with these fixed budgeting. It doesn't matter how good it is. And ultimately, not that large organizations distrusted their employees or the capabilities of their employees, but that was all human driven. That was human decision-making processes of, I'm going to weigh this investment versus this investment, and I hope I'm going to pick the right one. Whereas ultimately, we know that nobody's going to pick with a 100% success rate. Now, as you get into, again, letting the machine do what it needs to do, the machine is going to make mistakes, but it's going to learn and adapt and get better and better. And that's where, if it's hamstrung to where, oh, I did this wrong, even though I did this right, but now I'm out of funds, that's prohibiting the learning.
Yeah. Like I said, it's just going to require change management in terms of how people think of, hey, if I can have a positive ROI, advertising talks about return on ad spend, but if I can have a true incremental return on investment, I should let that thing run until it hits the level of, the level that I'm comfortable with, right? So I'm still at a positive return, but you don't want it to drop negative, but roll all day long and, make sure that I can drive as much profit as possible on the back end. So that will require a significant shift in thinking. So we're coming up on the close. So two more questions. So in an era of turning back to the shopper, in an era of inflation and shifting consumer values, we've talked a little bit about how shopper behaviors are changing, whether that's prioritizing value over price and local and brand switching. How does that impact what your platform supports? What are you seeing in terms of changing consumer values?
So it's very similar in the difficult economic times. Actually, as you go back to 2008, after the banking crisis, there was a great Harvard Business Review article. It was titled "The New Age of Consumerism," and it talked about how there's really the creation of the saving-centric customer. So if you look at one of the companies that absolutely exploded after 2008, it was Groupon. Right? People were looking for value in the form of discounts. Now, again, if it's coupon or not, that becomes a little bit irrelevant. But whenever we're in these deep economic troubled times, customers are really looking at every single item. And we see a lot of decreased basket size, increase in frequency, where people are clearly jumping from one store to the other just to pick up those extra few items. So as it comes down to, again, how does that play into when we talk about things like personalization, right? That becomes very important because, sometimes just the extra 5% off. That's one of the things that we talk about with retailers is try running a 5% off coupon. And again, we're so fixated on price and picture and it has to be this, it has to be that, demonstrating to a customer, here's an extra 5% on something you buy every day, right? Those things add up from a loyalty standpoint, from a value standpoint, and it reduces them maybe going down the street for something that's 10, 15% less expensive. Because, well, if I'm already here and I can save a little bit of extra money on this, customers are absolutely counting their dollars and their budgets, right? So how we can expand out the savings opportunity to what's relevant to people is very, very critical.
Yeah, you may have just answered my last question, but I'll ask it anyway. So before we close out, for a retailer or even a brand listening today, what's that one move they could make this upcoming quarter that would better position them to win in today's landscape?
From a retailer and from a brand, both of these things are slower moving machines, so it's hard to do something really quick. The best thing that they could do is really investigate how I can deliver a more relevant experience to my top customer. Whether you're a CPG or whether you are a retailer, identifying who your best customers are, identify your opportunity customers, and do something for them, right? Don't be afraid of the initial errors or the over expenditure, things like that. Once you can identify your customer segments from best customers to opportunity customers to all these different targets that may come up with, you just have to do something. What we see a lot of is there's this failure to launch or fear of start or did we make a mistake? We can only learn through execution and we only learn through mistakes that were made. And the whole nature of A and B testing is it's very hard to test B against something if A is not
Nothing.
there, right? So to do A and B testing, you first have to do A, right? So getting into that world of what can they do, there's lots of dynamic solutions that the IGA offers. There's lots of dynamic tools that all the loyalty providers that work with independent grocers, they already offer. But are we using those? Or are we just hoping that what we're doing already, or are we hoping that what others are doing for me through these channels is going to win the day for us? So I would encourage retailers to, now is the time to make incremental investments.
I think back in my Coke days, at one point there was a saying, we are the ones who are waiting for, right? Don't wait for some savior to come in and fix the problem. Have a bias towards action so that you can test and learn, to your point, and understand what's working and what's not working, and don't just get so focused on or so balled up in, am I going to do the right thing?
Yep.
Let's take that first step.
Yep.
So great advice,
Customers
Rob. Thank you.
are more accessible than ever because of the proliferation of technology that's out there. So whether it's a CPG who's leveraging the aggregate user base of all the loyalty programs across the country, or it's the grocer who's just been in the loyalty program for 3 or 4 years, these people are now very accessible. So if you're not deploying things on a weekly basis, then again, I would review, if you're a retailer who's not using your loyalty system, why are you in loyalty in the first place? And if you're a CPG who wants to grow their sales, and I understand the CPG world, they're met with, having gone to the grocery shop show, there's 500 companies who all sound like they do the exact same thing, and all this is out there. When is the consolidation of technology providers going to happen? Probably not for a long time, because if you follow TechCrunch, there's always a new retail media startup or data startup or this startup, and everybody's getting funded. So there's so many more options, but finding one that works for you and generates the ROI, or at least gives you the opportunity to learn from how you're executing, is key. Because with any retailer, any CPG, there's a learning curve in this technology, and you can delay starting all you want, but the moment you click send for the first time, that's day one.
Yeah, you can do all the planning in the world, but if you don't execute, that's an issue.
That's right.
So that's it for this episode of Shopper Matters. Big, huge thanks to you, Rob, and the team at RSA America for sharing practical wisdom on what it really means to modernize independent grocery retail. If you're interested in learning more about what RSA is doing in the space, you can visit rsaamerica.com. And that said, independent grocers who might feel that they're behind the big box retailers, whether that's mobile, digital, loyalty, that there's so many options to compete better and stay relevant. And I think the key piece is to lean in not only to the shopper behavior shifts that we discussed today, but making sure, as Rob said, you have a bias towards action and are doing something instead of just waiting for opportunities. So until next time, I'm Michael La Kier, and this was Shopper Matters.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for joining the Shopper Matters podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe so you'll automatically receive new episodes as they are released.